Now that a couple days have passed since the Forsaken main Easter egg was solved, and more importantly than when we finally seen that ending cutscene, I think it's safe to talk about spoilers. More specifically, I want to talk about the director and his identity being revealed. And what his identity is none other than Eddie. Yes, it was revealed that Eddie is the director of Requiem, and this is just insane to think about, especially for the future of this Dark Aether story. But for now, what I want to do is kind of explain the story of Eddie, and this is going from all the way to start how he got here to everything else we know up until Forsaken, and maybe even a teaser there soon after. But with all that said, let's go ahead and jump right into this. So where Eddie's story started was actually all the way back in Black Ops 2, obviously in the Origins ending cutscene. But then in BO3, alongside all the other children, they became a main focus. But where he really becomes important again is at the ending of Tog the Toten, or the ending of the Aether storyline, because in this ending, we see that only two characters from the previous story and world came from the original world to this new Dark Aether world. And those characters were first Samantha, which we've already seen in the story multiple times now, but then more importantly for this video, Eddie. And since we knew that Eddie and Samantha were both in this universe, and that we've already seen Samantha, we were wondering what the heck's going on with Eddie. And after a lot of theories and things going around, we finally saw in Forsaken's ending that he has been the Requiem's director this entire time. But how did Eddie live his life before becoming the Requiem director? Because we actually know a little bit about this from both the cutscene and a couple intels, which I want to go over. And the first thing I want to talk about is exactly that part of Samantha and Eddie coming from this world, because if those two characters came from this world, what the heck happened and how'd they get separated? Well, from what we've heard, it doesn't seem like Samantha remembers Eddie at all. In fact, she doesn't remember anything about even the previous world at all. She doesn't remember anything except her name, which is interesting because it doesn't seem like that's the case with Eddie. So that's a little suspicious, and I have a couple ideas for why that may be the case, but that's a different video for a different day. But either way, one thing we can confirm is that very early on, or maybe even the moment that Samantha and Eddie entered into this brand new world, they were separated. We know this because Samantha grew up in an orphanage in Germany, and then Eddie, we don't exactly know, but considering that he is the director of Requiem, which Requiem is a part of the CIA, people are speculating that he could have possibly grew up in the United States. Either way though, we actually learned something about his earlier life before Requiem and all that, and we learned this through the cutscene seeing two different pictures. The first picture that I want to talk about is a black and white picture of Eddie inside a fighter jet. And this image is very interesting for a couple different reasons. First, it implies that Eddie is a pilot, and more than that, he fought in some war. Now, to that first point about him being a pilot, it's very interesting because we know him as a scientist, so him being a pilot is just pretty weird to say the very least, but he still may be a scientist for reasons we'll get to in a bit. But at least in this image we just see him as a pilot who potentially just could have been drafted and could have been a scientist the whole time, but he was drafted and just became what he became. But also I want to mention that it does look like it's a jet, and because of that I think it's very likely that this is in Vietnam, and not only because of the jet but also because of his age, because if we assume that Samantha and Eddie arrived at the same time, it would land Eddie being in his 30s, which I think this is backed up because of the fact that we also see Eddie's face and he doesn't look very old. So, you know, I think it's very safe to assume he is in his 30s, which would imply he fought sometime during the Vietnam War, which is another interesting idea. But we also see another photo of Richtofen, and this one is a very surprising one. It's a picture of what looks like Eddie with a wife and a kid, a whole family, which is very, very interesting because for me, and I'm sure many other people, nobody really took Richtofen as a guy to have a whole family in type of situation, so that's something that I find to be quite interesting, but maybe his personality is slightly different, because it would make sense, because, you know, we do see the difference in personalities between Ultimus Richtofen and Primus Richtofen, so we may see another slight shift to him here, or even maybe a major shift to his personality. But regardless, we do see that he had a whole family. And I say had because there is some speculation of what happened to his son and wife. Now, I want to get into this, but unfortunately I'm not going to have time in this video, so we're going to have to return to this in a separate video, hopefully coming out very soon after this one. But just keep that in the back of your head about his son for future videos. But regardless, another thing we also learn about Eddie is that his professional life after being a pilot, or whatever he was back then, because we actually learned that he had a role in the CIA even before Requiem, and what that role was, the Associate Deputy Director of the CIA's DSNT, and what DSNT stands for is Directorate of Science and Technology, and this is a real life branch of the CIA, and as you may assume, it has a lot to do with science and technology, where they develop new technologies and come up with new science. And this is why I assumed that this Eddie also could be a scientist, much like we've seen both Ultimus and Primus Richtofen in the past, because why would he be a part of the Director of Science and Technology if he didn't know what he was doing there? So I still think that we're going to keep that whole personality trait about him. But now I want to quickly go over how he became the director of Requiem, because as I mentioned, he was just the associate deputy director of the CIA's DSNT. But how did he get to the director of Requiem? Well, it actually happened very soon after Valentina restarted the cyclotron in Moscow, Poland, in other words, Die Machina. And after this, all of the outbreak zones started popping up across the world, and the CIA wanted to do something to stop this, and they didn't really have any ideas, but one person approached them with a plan that seemed to work. And of course, this was none other than Eddie. And because of this, they gave him everything he needed and even started himself a new branch of the CIA, of course, called the Office of Requiem. And from here, after becoming the director, he handpicked all the other people that will be in charge of different parts. This, of course, chose Weaver, Dr. Gray, Dr. Strauss, and Major Carver. But now let's talk about what exactly the director, or Eddie, has been doing this entire time while he was the director of Requiem. Now, obviously, he did the obvious things in Die Machina. He had to close the cyclotron in Moscow, Poland, and then inside Maratoni, he had to stop the Forsaken from entering to this world because of reasons that we'll talk about. And then he also had us do a little bit of the outbreak stuff, but that was kind of not really him. We were going behind his back, we were going with Samantha, but regardless, that's what he generally had us do. But in the background, he was doing some very nefarious things that I think we have to go over. And to really understand exactly what he was doing, I want to play you guys these two radios because they are incredibly significant.
Argus, it's Whiskers. Yeah, it's back. Listen, I don't have much time, but I do have information. I know what Omega is planning. What do I want? I want a clean slate. My burn notice destroyed, my record expunged. Let bygones be bygones. No. Well, what if I told you I can deliver you Zykov on a silver platter? Yeah, that got your attention. Tuesday, 10 a.m., our old dead drop. I'll give you everything I have on Operatia Izbavitel. I'm just telling you the date has changed, alright? June 4th. If you want him, you'll have to move fast. The Forsaken's cage has been completed to your specifications. Once Zykov gives us the creature's location, we'll extract him directly into our captivity. Kravchenko is blinded by abject loyalty and his determination to appease his superiors. You know this, ever since you first told him about the Forsaken. Don't bullshit a bullshitter. I'm not stupid, I know it was you. I'll admit, at first I thought it was Strauss, maybe Weaver. But it's been you this whole time. You're the Requiem mole. I just want to figure out why. Hey, remember, you came to me at Outpost 25. You told me to get rid of her, despite Kravchenko's orders. I threw her in the dark ether for you, just because you didn't anticipate they'd get her back. That's not on me. All I'm saying is, you want this thing, the Forsaken. You want it so badly that you don't care which side gets it for you, as long as you get it. If you're gonna pull this off, you need me. So, we have an agreement? Clean slate? Good. I'll let you know when. Have your men ready.
So, in this radio, we learn 4 very, very significant things. The first one is that Peck was the mole in Omega this entire time. That's very substantial, and that's just insane to think about because I honestly never saw this coming. But then we get into the more significant things, and the first more significant thing is that we learned that Eddie has been the one leaking information from Requiem to Omega, and one of those very important things that he leaked was the existence of the Forsaken, which has been very interesting because we never really understood why Omega was aware of the Forsaken, but now we actually do. It's because Eddie told them. Now, the new question becomes, how the heck does Eddie know about the Forsaken? Like, he really shouldn't know about a lot of these things, but that's a whole other video that we will be making in the future, but for now, we just have to understand that's how they found out. But another significant thing that happened is that we actually learned why the heck Peck threw Samantha in the Dark Ether in Firebase Z, because it always seemed like something that was just dumb to do. I mean, you were trying to get information out of her, so you're just throwing her in the Dark Ether. Like, it didn't make any sense, but now it does, because the one who wanted her thrown in the Dark Ether was the director, and Peck did it on the director's order, which is just insane to think about. Now, fortunately for the director, it all worked out for him, as we've seen at the end of Forsaken. Samantha goes back into the Dark Ether in order to defeat the Forsaken, but at the same time, it is incredibly interesting to see that this was a part of their plan the entire time. Now, the final and maybe the most significant thing about this radio, which is hard to say because there's a lot of significant things, but the final thing is that we learn that how Peck knew how to build the device in order to capture the Forsaken was because Eddie told him how to build it, which is just insane to think about because it draws back to that same question. How the heck does Eddie know how to do these things? It just doesn't make sense. There's a huge evidence for why Eddie knows things, and these are things that may hopefully be explained in the future because it's just incredibly interesting to see. But again, this is something that we will talk about in the future, but it makes sense because we also hear in other radios, not only this, that people were questioning how Peck knew how to build this machine. Like, how the heck did he come up with these ideas? And he was being very suspicious about it, but now we know how. But overall, the main thing you should take from this part is that not only did Eddie tell Peck how to build this machine, and it's questionable how he knew how to build it, but that the plan from Eddie was to capture the Forsaken the entire time. And this brings us to the big boy, Project Janus. And in the ending cutscene, we see some of the factors that need to be played in order for Project Janus to succeed. And we read these when it says, Entity acquired, all breaches sealed, Maxis is locked within the Dark Ether. She's no longer a problem for Project Janus. So here we learn that in order for Project Janus to proceed, the two major things was to capture the Forsaken, and second, lock Maxis in the Dark Ether, which is very significant, but why exactly Maxis has to be trapped in the Dark Ether is something we're going to have to wait and see. But for now, we could actually look at a little bit of what Project Janus is and what exactly they are planning to do with the Forsaken. Because in 2 brand new pieces of intel, we learn 2 significant things. And in this document, we learn that they are taking the Forsaken to a location in West Virginia. And this location is kind of insane because what they are currently doing is building this facility to hold the Forsaken that is going to require 5,000 tons of steel. And after it's completed, they also started hiring a ton of scientists and military personnel. So it seems like they're going to be doing something crazy here. Unfortunately, we don't learn much about exactly what they're going to do here, but at the very least we know a general idea of that they're going to probably be doing some testings on the Forsaken, considering that they hired a ton of scientists. But that's not it, because we also learn something significant about Project Janus and who's involved. Because we also have this other document called Memorandum for the Board, and here confirms something that a lot of us have suspected for a long time, and this is that Project Janus isn't a one-man show, and Eddie's not the only one involved. Now, potentially he could be playing everybody involved and just using them for his own goals, but at the very least the idea of Project Janus isn't his own idea, and there's a group of people who are all involved in this. Now, at first people assumed that they were all people in the US government or even the CIA or something like that, which is still possible, but one major line from this document really throws that all up in the air, because there's a line that says, "You should also know it would be disastrous for your pockets and the shareholders." And the mention of shareholders definitely draws us to only one conclusion, that someone, at least one of the people involved in Project Janus, is actually in charge or owns a company, which is very, very interesting because we don't really see a company really getting involved in the storyline of zombies ever before, at least in Treyarch zombies stories at least. So it's interesting to see that the possibility of one of the people involved in Project Janus is actually an owner of a company, which makes me very, very interested to see who else is also involved here and what is their overall goal. What do they plan to do with the Forsaken? I mean, the mention of a company obviously jumps my head to doing some company things, right? But I just don't know if that's exactly the case. And honestly, this has just left me with more questions than answers after seeing this, because it really makes you think, like, who exactly could be involved in Project Janus? Is it people in government, people in the CIA, people in the private sector? What is going on with this and what is the goals? But that's where it leaves us off with Eddie's story thus far in the Dark Aether storyline. And that's about it. I'd love to hear what you guys think of everything we know about Eddie. Do you guys like what you're hearing, not like? Are you excited to see that Richtofen's back in the zombie storyline officially or anything like that? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section. But if you guys did enjoy the video, definitely do all the normal YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, bell, share, and all that great stuff. But I'm going to go and I'll catch you guys in the next stream, video, or even like it may be, and laters, guys.